Hello, preschool teachers. Tell me if this scenario sounds familiar to you. You ever have a child take the little toy diaper bag full of doll clothes, dump out all of the doll clothes, fill that bag with the toy food from the dramatic play area, carry that bag somewhere else, dump out all the play food right into the middle of the floor, take the bag somewhere else to fill it with still yet another type of item? Or how about this? Ever have a child fill a shovel with sand? Take that shovel out of the sandbox, walk it around, just carrying the sand, and then find a place, dump the sand completely not in the sandbox, but elsewhere. Um, so these can seem like challenging behaviors, and something that doesn't seem to work within a classroom setting. But I am Nicole Trevelyan, and this is Wildwood Teaching. And today we are going to talk about how those behaviors actually have a purpose and how you can make it work in a formal preschool setting. Um, so if you have been tuning in lately to our videos, we have been talking about schema play. And basically, schema play is a repetitive behavior that a child exhibits that is a clue to really something they are working out through play. That they are using that behavior as a learning process. And so 2 weeks ago, I did just kind of a broad overview of schemas. Last week, I talked about trajectory and positioning and connecting schemas. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into transporting schema. So, the past two videos, I had a PDF. It's also attached to this video. The PDF is one page, very simply lists 9 play schemas. The next column has kind of the behaviors that children might be exhibiting that might be a clue that this is the schema that they are working within at this moment. The next column has what they're learning. So, how you can know in your teacher mind that this type of behavior is actually working towards something. Last column is how to extend that play, how to bring in other materials, other activities for children that can help them continue on their journey within that schema. Now, that last column, I'm going to warn you now, is blank because I'm going to give you some extension ideas throughout this video, but I really want you to use that last column to fill in your own ideas, right? You know what's going to work once you've heard really what the schema is and understood how it works and hear some of my examples. You will know how to have examples in your own setting that work within your setting, that work with the children that you are working with and their needs and their interests. And so follow along with me, have that PDF handy, and so you can keep track of your ideas and bring them into your setting. So this scenario at the beginning of this filling and dumping and carrying things from one place to another is transporting schema. And basically, children, yes, are working on fine and gross motor skills through transporting schema, but they are also working on some math concepts, right? So, conservation of number, right? If I take a set of objects and I take that same set of objects and I put them in a container and I dump them out, do I still have the same number of objects? If I take that set of objects and I put them in a pile or I spread them out, do I still have the same number of objects? And this is also going to happen with measurement and volume, right? If I am transporting water from one place to another or from one container to another, I'm conserving the same volume of water, even though it might be changing shapes. Or maybe children are working on organizational skills. And I know that that sounds a little bit strange, right? Because what organizational skills? They're dumping things all over the place. But they're thinking about, if you notice, oftentimes what they'll do is they'll do things in sets, right? So they're not dumping, right? Even if they're doing it on top of each other, it's like first they're dumping the pine cones, then they're dumping the jewels, then they're dumping. So they are doing a bit of sorting, right? And then, right, they're also thinking about where things go and where they belong, right? And oftentimes there is a cleanup to it, And so then they're resetting things, right? How did I find the object that I was looking for before? Or where are things going? And so I'm going to admit, and what I want to talk to you about is how we can make this work within a classroom setting, because I'm going to admit that transporting schema may be the one that I personally find the most challenging to deal with as a teacher, or perhaps just my personality. I think because one is that it does. I mean, it can, from an adult's eye, seem completely purposeless. I mean, all children are doing is they're just dumping things. They're not even playing with it afterwards. They're just dumping it somewhere, right? And I think secondly, I happen to be somebody who really thrives on order and organization. So things all over the place is just not my personality. We also have a lot of things, right? If you are in a classroom setting like mine where you have a lot of natural loose parts, that you do have those pine cones and those acorns and those shells and those pebbles, there's a lot of stuff to go all over the place, and cleanup can be a challenge. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges before we get into extension ideas. And so, one of the things that we do is, you know, um, we've had different ways of dealing with like the mess, I guess, depending on the classroom. I mean, I've always been of the persuasion of, kind of we don't clean up until it's cleanup time because some other child might come and use it, or a child might leave it and come back to it, right? That we want to leave things out so that children can work through it. But we have had times where, the dumping has gotten so much that it's gotten to be a lot of cleanup at the end. And so we've kind of said, here's your limit of cleanup. If you've dumped 3 things, clean that up before you move on to dumping. It also helps to have a lot of small containers, right? A lot of strawberry baskets or bowls, or what I found works really well with my group outside, trucks, dump trucks, right? So that when we are cleaning it, we are still filling and dumping. So we're using the behavior that they want to be practicing anyway, to, as part of our cleanup. And again, I'm going to say, like, if you are doing things where they're transporting sand, or water, being outside is helpful, because then at least you're not worried about vacuuming it up off the carpet or worrying about mold when it's spill, right? They're spilling something outside. Now, that does not mean that I want to lose all the sand from the sandbox. And so what we do have are some just parameters around some things can be moved and some things cannot be moved. And the sand just happens to be one of those things that, you can move it. We have a very large sand pit area. You can move it from one area of the sand pit to the other area of the sand pit, but we can't take it out of the sand pit because it never goes back in. But you could do the same behaviors with dirt, right? We've got dirt in the mud kitchen. We've got dirt on the hill behind me. You want to transport the dirt from one part of the hill to another part of the hill. Great. Move the dirt wherever you want. And it functions very similarly to sand. Also, there are particular, and children usually understand this. So, particular places that we don't move other objects to. So we don't take the puppets to the mud kitchen. Um, and just a simple thing of, yeah, we can move things wherever we want, and we can, but we want to keep them clean. So we're not going to take, other toys that aren't mud kitchen toys to the mud kitchen. So, just kind of setting up those parameters so that children can still explore, but you can still feel like you can deal with your sanity as a teacher. And so how can you support it? Well, I already mentioned you can provide a lot of natural loose parts. You can provide a lot of different size containers, right? You can, if you have a garden or you have some trees, put that instinct to work, right? Have them harvesting all of your vegetables, right? Packing it in those containers, dumping it somewhere, right? We already said, these might be some type of physics, right? Maybe you are adding a pulley system to your sandbox, or some funnels to your sandbox where they are, or some ramps where they are doing that dumping and pulling and filling, but also learning about physics. Um, Maybe you want to make some treasure maps, right? Some where do things belong, right? As we are making some organization ideas in our classroom, and maybe that helps us clean up, or maybe they want to reorganize things in your classroom. And so maybe you're labeling then where things are going and bringing in some literacy and still working with that transporting schema. Maybe you are bringing in wagons or something else where they can get some heavy work, some gross motor work while they are transporting objects. So I hope this gave you some ideas of how you can look at what might be a challenging behavior within the classroom, but make it work so that children still get to explore in a hands-on, playful way. Um, and then join us here next week, because next week we'll be moving on to enclosing and enveloping schemas. And so I will see you there.